Oh, look, mate, it's nice to formally
Yeah,
see you and meet you and to be able to have a chat like this. I do appreciate you giving me some of your time, and I think
no
it
worries.
was kind of cool to sort of follow you up after having a chat with Feltz last when was it, last Tuesday? You know, because again, like I was curious to hear about
You're right.
some of the stuff that he'd done post Loughborough, and obviously, you know, you guys have worked together,
Mm,
and there was a he sort of shared a few insights onto the stuff that you've done with Cam and AJ, and also he talked a bit about his time with Shiny as well, which was good. But I think
yeah.
I'm sort of keen to hear from say the fast bowling coaches now. Now, like obviously, I'm not sure like how much you're able to kind of elaborate on in regards to current players and their, you might say, techniques and coaching methods and that sort of stuff. But I just always think it's quite interesting to hear like when you've had say someone like Cam, when Phelps was kind of talking about, I guess having four stressies, just how, and I think he was
Mm,
sort of touching on where his action was, for instance, it had sort of gone a bit away from what you'd probably think is natural to him and did kind of require quite a rebuild. And as
yeah.
say a private fast bowling coach, the area I work in to say you could bring me a fast bowler, it doesn't matter what I do with them, they're still not playing professionally. If you have a professional fast bowler, whatever they've done to get there is like obviously it's enough to play professionally. So I think it's a really interesting kind of conversation to say hear from a coach who has worked professionally
Mm,
when the conversation I think is quite different. As much as I might believe that I just like the idea that you should always be looking to improve or like working in a direction where you're gonna keep getting better and better out of yourself. Like if you're good enough to play there, like you might be hesitant to kind of do that. And say someone like a Cam who is coming off a bunch of stress, he's like, I'm kind of really curious to see how that
mm.
relationship with Felt's worked, what you guys did, and what sorts of best drills you guys used. How many poles you set up? Was it 8? Was it 10?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, right, okay. I think what's interesting, what you said there, mate, is I think it's true whether you work in the professional game or with your young 12-year-old that's running around his local park. I think first and foremost, you'd appreciate this as a coach. I think there's a huge duty of care and a huge responsibility that comes with coaching fast bowlers because of the risk factors
Mm,
associated with it, particularly with the injury rates and it's not just the physical injury; it's the impact that injury has on young quicks. My
mm,
conversation with Cam when I first met Greeny when I came to WA was quite an eye opener. It was quite an emotional conversation, and he basically said to me that if he doesn't get this sorted, if he gets hurt again, he'll walk away from bowling and he'll just be a batter and not bowl. And
mm.
that's really sad to
Wow.
hear that it got to that point that someone that we can see now has got some real potential as a fast bowler was going to actually walk away from that because it was the emotional
Mm,
toll of getting hurt and missing games of cricket. So, and that's the same conversation a young
yeah.
11, 12, or 13-year-old might have with their parents and their coaches if they keep getting hurt. So, first and foremost, I take it doesn't matter who it is. We've got a duty of care to use our skill as
Mm,
coaches to put them into safe positions, to look after them so they can learn and develop and enjoy their skill. Because if you don't enjoy it, it's a very it's a very painful thing to do
mm.
if you're not enjoying it. So from that point of view,
It's a
that
long
drives a lot of
day.
my conversations, and that wouldn't matter whether it was professional. Yeah, it is a long day, and whether you're professional or amateur or junior or senior, it really doesn't matter. The conversation is actually pretty similar. And what you said there, which I absolutely love, is it's one of my non-negotiables as a coach. Is when you come into contact with myself or whatever, that's our first conversation. Are you open to getting better than you are right now? Because if you are, then we're going to go on a wonderful journey of discovery, and it won't be a straight up sort of nice even ride. Be prepared for some bumps along the way, but ultimately it's going to be a lot of fun, and you're going to get the benefit. Um,
Mm,
I'll elaborate a little bit further and say there's only ever two reasons that I intervene. I have to be 100% confident that I'm going to get a performance benefit to the player, or I'm keeping them safer than they are now because there's a potential risk for injury or they are getting injured. Other than that, unless I'm happy with those two potential outcomes, then I think it's leave them well alone and just support them with what they have now.
Which I think is a professional, like, it is a really interesting kind of environment for me to think about the differences between, say, an amateur. Again, like, it doesn't really matter what I do with them. They're still not playing professionally. So you can kind of be a bit more, I guess you might say, aggressive. And I know Paul was mentioning how your plan with Cam was, it was, okay, realistically, how could we sort of phase out some blocks and then let's take it back just a step so we can be like absolutely sure that whatever we do is like, it's not kind of going to be a step back. But, say with someone like Cam that you've gone, all right, let's actually do something. Like, I'm sort of curious to hear about what sort of blocks or what kind of phases or what kind of protocols, without going into it in too much detail, but just sorts of things that you were looking for as a coach to see him through.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, you got to look at what's the mechanism that's creating the injury. What are the issues that are compromising his position? With Cam, again, you're absolutely right. Professional bowler, been through programs, 20 years of age when I got hold of him, or 19. So things are pretty ingrained. There's some habits there that we knew we were going to have to break. But I sort of think of it, rather than trying to break a habit, try and instill something new. So you can go at it from that point of view. So we're not consciously telling him he's got to undo what he's doing. We're going to teach you something new. We're going to give your brain some new puzzles to try and solve. And in doing that, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to find it difficult, but you're going to have some fun. And some of those, things will come to light as we progress. But the first and foremost was understanding why Cam was getting hurt. Now, anyone that has seen Cameron's action over time would see that those usual risk factors that we identify, huge amounts of lateral flexion and huge amounts of rotation and a 6'7" immature body that weighs 110 kilos under a huge amount of force. It was a recipe for disaster. And then when you throw in the overs that's expected in professional cricket and the frequency of those overs, it was a perfect storm, really. So, the first and foremost, it was looking at the footage, doing the stuff that you and I do best, which is to analyse and sort of look at all the science, I guess, which is where Feltz was so important to me. Like Paul Felton, if you discovered, is an absolute marvel and a resource for me as a professional coach that I think is essential, because I didn't spend years at university studying biomechanics, but I need to have a really good understanding. And he simplified for me the potentially unsimplifiable, if that's a word. And in using his help and then my skill as a coach, I guess, is to try and take his message and simplify it for Cameron so as not to confuse him and make it seem a very scary proposition. And the one thing that Feltz was brilliant at highlighting for me was when you change someone, there's another risk here as well. In fixing them and making them healthier, are you taking away their performance? Are we taking Cameron's X factor away by completely remodeling him? What made him fast? What gave him those things? So we had to factor that in as well. But ultimately, number one, get him safe and get him playing cricket again. Cam was really open because it was an easy sell because he was getting hurt. But because of the fact that we were going to be rebuilding his action to a point, I felt the most important process in this was coming up with an idea or a method that, Cam could understand without getting confused. It's quite daunting for Cam to think about technical change, which it is with a lot of young players. So I went down the route of having physical interventions and quite an implicit way of coaching. So basically setting up a puzzle, which we touched on there, the poles, and saying to him, right, you need to find a way through there. And I'm just going to sit back and watch and observe and watch your body change its position, because the interventions are going to dictate that you need to do that. And then once his brain starts to solve the puzzle, start to get him to articulate to me, what are you actually doing, Cam, to solve this riddle. What are you doing to fit through these poles they're horrible, they're squeezing you, they are really changing what you want to do naturally.
Yeah, the best poles.
And that was always going to take a bit of time.
Yeah.
And you touched on it there.
Yeah.
It's not a case of sticking 2 or 3 poles down in the crease and say, get through there. We must have had 20, 30 poles because we took them a long way back into his run-up. We took them a long way out the other side of his action to really control his entry, his position at the crease, and his exit. It was a tough ask for him because I squeezed him as well. Like, we didn't give him a lot of space because we wanted to make sure that we did shift his position.
Yeah.
The tricky bit to that is the patience element. He needed to be patient because coaching that way, it takes you longer to get to the answer and longer to get to where you want to be. But I think it's worth the investment of time.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a couple of things there. One of the conversations I've really enjoyed having with myself and thinking about like what's my like philosophy for developing a fast bowler, and that's where I enjoyed I don't just want to be a technical coach, and like, you know, when you first start, you share some stuff on Facebook, the first thing people say is, "Oh, can you coach me through a straighter front leg?" But you often find, like, at least from the questions that I'll get, it's like, to become a better fast bowler, they'll pick something, and then like, okay, so if I get better at that, it'll make me a better fast bowler. So it's like they're taking these secondary approaches to becoming better, whether it's speed, whether it's, you know, a brace front leg, and it's like, no, to be a better fast bowler, you got to become a better fast bowler. And what is a better fast bowler doing? You can break it down from take wickets, minimise runs, and then go into all the areas of that. But this whole concept of like, what's an effective training approach? Like, and I sort of thought like, well, in my head, it was I need an effective approach and I need a positive training outcome. Like me saying, let's try to make you bowl faster when you're like poorly aligned and you can't bowl straight. Maybe that's not the right time. And if I try to do it by saying just run in faster, it might not work. So, and I remember when I kind of first started coaching, like, you know, again, it probably wasn't so implicit. You had much more internal cues. And this is where I found it was so interesting to sort of think through where my coaching might be now, where it is much more based on like your experience of fast bowling. Can I get you to say, have a straight front leg without ever saying straighten the front leg? If I can try to give you a feeling of what it's like to say, use your front leg and your rear leg together and like step over the top of it, and then tell them, all right, now try and go and do that by bending the front leg. And I was like, well, that doesn't feel right. Well, good. Now you kind of get an idea of both. And I think it's just so interesting to hear like how other coaches have gone through trying to develop those implicit means. And you know, again, like when you think about how you develop a coaching plan, Felton also kind of touched on going, maybe you wouldn't always use so many constraints. You know, it's not like there's a perfect way to kind of approach it. But like you said, with someone like Cam, like if you got time and this is your last chance at doing it, I just think you may as well. And then I think it's interesting to hear like, all right, well, you've gone down the constraints-led approach, which, you know, I love that. But so if you want to maximize the implicit gains and how they stick with them when you start to take away the constraints, like I'm curious, like how you guys manage that. And that's really getting to the art of coaching, going, you know, what were some of the things that you look for to go, all right, I reckon you're good at progressive, and that was shit, let's go back a step.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing you got to remember too, Cam was under a bit of time pressure in terms of there was still an expectation he was going to play while this work was going on, because
he got selected,
although he had a winter, that's right, he got selected in a test series, one day internationals first, and I was like, oh, part of me was like, this is amazing, but another part of me was like, oh my God, he's not ready yet. But you know, there's more that has to go into this process than just the technical. I'm like you. I don't want to be a technical coach necessarily, but I do believe technique is so important. And you know, you think of many other sports. I think of professional golfers. They employ a swing coach, but they will still understand how their body moves and how their swing feels because they invest time in it. A lot of young fast bowlers have no idea how their body moves or why it does what it does, or what a good position is and what a poor position is, because they just don't invest the time. So the one beauty about working with Cameron and doing the implicit way and the constraints-based approach was he had to start trying to really understand and feel what he was doing, because I wasn't going to tell him, and I wasn't going to show him any footage, and I wasn't going to give him any other option other than to tell me. And it took a long time for him to start coming up with the right answers, because I had the luxury of sitting back and watching this thing unfold and change in front of my eyes within a session. But he didn't have that luxury. He was just trying not to decapitate himself on a pole. So I think from that point of view,
they're plastic. We should say that.
I think from that point of view, yeah. But that was all the motivation he needed to get through, is not take his eye out. But so once Cam was able to start telling me about, for example, with him, his big cue was his shoulders and how he entered the crease. Once he realised that he had an early shoulder turn, which created a big change of direction and led to some really poor alignment. Once he understood the way he was bringing his arms into the action and all the rest of it, he started to realise that by changing his shoulder and his arms, he was able to enter the crease far straighter, maintain balance or a more balanced position, which was ultimately all he needed to do to get through those poles, is to be balanced. And I think that's what bowling is. I mean, you've probably watched kids and adults and that run in from varying different angles, varying different ways of running, jump heights, bound heights, distances, all that sort of stuff, doing the best they can to become unbalanced. When all I want them to do is stay balanced, because that way you've got half a chance of putting yourself in a good position, creating and transferring that wonderful energy towards your target. And guess what? If you do that effectively, you're generally going to be pretty successful. But most kids are fighting their bodies throughout the whole bowling action and trying to stay upright, and in doing so create all these issues, not just for the health of their body, but for the direction that they want to send the ball in. So ultimately, I think, mate, in terms of that transfer into a game, it was always going to be tough. So we knew that once the season started, Cameron still had to have some sort of restrictions on him, because he was not going to be perfect for a period of time. And when he got into games, he was always likely to revert. We knew that, and we definitely did see that at times. So it was important that we still touched on his technical work as he returned to playing and as he kept playing. So how he structured his week was going to be really important. Now, like most young bowlers, technical work becomes horrible, because it becomes very clunky, very, difficult and frustrating. There's a lot of emotion can come into it and all that sort of stuff. So to do that close to competition would have been the wrong time. So if I was to give you a very basic overview, if we knew he had a game on Saturday, we would structure his technical sessions for early in the week, knowing that he could safely park those no matter how good or negative the outcome was. And then his focus could switch to competition as he came close to playing. And he just had to become very good at parking the technical sessions, focusing on his outcome, playing the game, review his performance, but know that his next session was likely to be another technical session. And then over a period of time, we'll know that the work was going to get sort of closer and closer together. The workloads in match were keeping him safe. Cricket Australia were fantastic. I mean, taking a fast bowler into an international test series and saying, yep, we'll manage his workloads in a test match, I've never heard of that before. So their willingness to do that was also a huge part of why he was able to cope. And they're still doing it now, as you know. I think they're still managing him well. And I think having Pat Cummins as your captain helps.
Yeah, for sure. And I reckon maybe they may have had some experience in the past of, say, I'm pretty sure it was Pattinson who, coming back from Australia, went to, I think it was a subcontinent series, bowled like 50 or had just crazy workload and ended up breaking down again. So it's interesting to see how these things kind of, you have enough historical data. That was actually, I had a chat with, oh fuck, I forgot his name, yeah, that's not good. I shouldn't say that. But I had a chat with, what's what's his first name? It's Kellett. Oh, fuck, it's bad. I won't be able to put this part up because I can't have people know I've got his first name. But the S&C coach that was with Australia, Thingo Kellett, I'm fucking drawing a mental blank. It's going to shit me here. I'm going to look on Instagram just to double check what it is. Kellett. I know it's an A as well.
You'll shout it out.
Aaron, fuck. I was like, you know what it was? I was thinking like AJ Tye, and I've got Aaron Kellett and a couple other things as well. And I was like, oh, fuck, Aaron. But AK, I had a chat with him, 2 years ago, and he was sort of saying, one of the things to say the resting policies and whatnot. It's like we have enough historical data, and that's just a wonderful term that like they've seen the workloads they've done, they've got the scans. It's easy to kind of know when, like, specifically for this individual, when they're running a red light, because we've seen what their body does when that happens. And, like, that's just, it's just wonderful to be like, we can use that so intentionally and be like, this is going to get the best out of you for your longevity. And look, we want that longevity. So you kind of just got to do it. And I think we've had quite a few fast bowlers kind of break down across their career and potentially not always want to adopt the, you might say, best practice recovery, which is, I mean, what do they say about fast bowlers?
Yeah.
Like, they're all dumb, so kind of just want to play and bowl fast and knock blokes' heads off. But yeah, look, I think that's that was something that was really interesting. But you see, you talking about the early shoulder rotation, I reckon because Felton put me onto this too when I think it was a year and a half ago. I sent him footage of a bowl, and I was just curious to have somebody else look at it. And he picked out the left arm in the run up. I think it was just before the jump. Left arm starts to come across. It doesn't enter back out, so we don't get that rotation coming back. And I've seen quite a lot of fast bowlers do that. And that's almost like if someone does that, I can already see a mixed action kind of coming. Now is that mixed action going to lead them too far into kind of side flexion, or are they going to end up kind of dumping the shoulder blade and bowling more random? It was just such an interesting kind of thing to kind of pick up and think to myself going, I reckon I could overcome this by just doing a shit, like teaching them how to run and move their arms together. And if they can link that kind of back into their action, like hopefully we can start to see some improvements. But I guess the next question there for say, in a more theoretical sense is going, if you've got someone like that and I say, nah, let's separate the hips and shoulders now because, that's going to give us some more speed. Are we going to then start to put a new stress or pressure on their body, which I think is, always I haven't seen it happen yet in my realm of work, but I'm not working with guys that have to play for 4 days or 5 days and they kind of go from there. But the other one that I know Felton was good with was just running up too fast, because you see people that know those 4 biomechanical correlates and they take them at face value. It's like a brace front leg is correlated with ball speed, but like if you just get a brace front leg, but you don't use the front leg in the way it's supposed to be used, it'll look pretty. I reckon like sometimes you see people with their leg land brace, but the whole body will move over with it. Like the hip, the shoulder, the bowling arm, it all kind of comes through together. You don't get that kind of segmented acceleration. And when they release the ball, they're almost like that. They're so tall. There's no kind of, you might say, energy going through the action. But they'll think, no, that's looking good. I've got a straight front leg. Well, you've gotten slower now, so. Oh, look, that's a bit of a tangent that I just love to. I do love my tangents. Like, I just love to see where they go. Simon's great for that as well. But I've got where I was at before.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask something else about Cam, but I think, how's it gone now, actually? Like, he's had the test series, he's come back, like, he's now at a stage where he's bowling, and he's probably gotten through, a year and a half of say, return to bowling?
Two test series, or 3 test series now he's got through, and obviously into the 1 day setup as well. But the deload phase for him is really important as well, how they manage in between games and the rest of it, because his body needs to recover. And his bones need to mend and build again and all those good things that we know about. So, he needs to rest. And also there's a mental stress to this as well. Like Cam also has to try and bat 6 for his country. So, from the mental load for a young man of only 22, he has to have some time out from cricket. one of the things I promised him when I moved back here to the UK just recently was that, I'm still going to be involved. And I know Andrew McDonald, Australian Now head coach, and I spent a lot of time together with Cam. So we want to keep that link going, because I think continuity is something that can sometimes go missing in professional sport, especially with someone like Cam, who's had a lot of interventions and placed a lot of trust and faith in me. To suddenly just abandon him now would be the wrong thing to do. And it's very important that he and I keep that link, and he's going to come across other bowling coaches in his career, and it's important he stays true to the work he's done and filters and knows what to take on and what to not take on. But at the moment, I think it's just important that he recovers. But I think what's picking up on the point you just made a little bit there, you say it was off on a tangent, but you're absolutely spot on though. It's when you do make a change, there is obviously that little concern that you're going to put load, or there's going to be an adaptation to moving a little bit differently. But I generally feel, from my experience, that if you put a bowler in a better position, their body almost thanks you for it. One of the best questions I ask most young fast bowlers, or even professional fast bowlers, is, if I could say to you, how would you like to bowl faster but with less effort, would you be interested? I haven't yet come across a bowler that says no, I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just the pace. It's not the pace bit. Yeah, it's not the pace bit that excites them the most. It's the fact it's not going to hurt so much. Because you're absolutely right. There's so many little things that come from the run up in particular, and Feltz has been fabulous for me, and he and I are on the same page with this. I do most of my coaching before they even get anywhere near the crease, because I know that a lot of the issues that we see in the crease are a result of the way they run, the way they move, how fast they run, how high they jump is another one. I mean, some guys think they're doing a high jump, and it's just, it's so it's so counterproductive to trying to move and create energy towards a target, and then you jump vertically. It doesn't really make sense. So, and you can get some huge wins and some huge technical changes and improvements just from focusing on those parts, which are actually an easier sell because they're not highly technical, so they're not as scary. And with children and with kids in particular, you stick a row of poles in front of a professional bowler like Cameron Green, they look at you like you're from outer space, and what's this? But you put a row of poles in front of a youngster, they go, this is like a playground. How fun's this? And yet we don't see enough of this stuff, these constraints approaches, or this real focus on getting into better positions at a young enough age. And I think for me, that's my biggest frustration as a coach is what's happening at those younger age groups. That still means that we're having the same issues. We're still getting a Cameron Green coming to a program at 17, 18 with an action that's just destined to hurt him. And the other thing, I'm sure you've come across this, is how much cricket they play, how many times a week they bowl. Completely uncontrolled, a lot of these youngsters. They play for their school, they play for their club, they play with their mates, they play for their district. They just bowl so many overs with a compromised technique and a body that's not ready, and we wonder why we have this problem.
I mean, Nathan Kiley said it really well. I'm pretty sure it was him in one of the podcasts I had when I first started doing these things. But he was like, if you're a young, talented fast bowler, you're at the highest level of injury. Like, to be a good teenager, so obviously you're going to play probably, if you're a private school, if you play rep cricket and then you play local, it's like, it's insane. Plus, back in the day at least, they were much more likely to go and play, cricket during lunchtime at school. And I just think, it's an interesting one to have to try to tell people, like, you need to sort of prioritize certain bowling loads. But yeah, you're right. And I really do enjoy the links you talk about between the technique and the mindset, because, I love going full circle with the four pillars. It's just such a wonderful thing to link together that at all times, I usually put the tactical skill in the middle, then you've got the technique, mindset, and physical, because, like, the skill everyone's doing. And that's when, like, I might try to sell to people or more like educate. Like, you just want to work on your skill and tactics, it's great. Like if you want to just let the rest be as they are, they'll always like the wheels will always be turning. You just won't be doing anything about them. So like you probably should do something about them, and everything links back to mindset. And I also like to split mindset from a performance perspective, and then just from a like individual kind of perspective. Because like I could give you great mental skills, but like if you yourself are an insecure, potentially young guy that you just can't believe in yourself, it doesn't matter what skills I give you, you won't believe they'll work. Like it's almost going to become a self-defeating prophecy where, I'll give you these wonderful tools, you won't believe they'll work, and then you'll almost like justify the reason why they won't work. That's the future you'll then start to create. And I can only imagine like the conversations that could potentially pop up with, say, some professional fast bowlers that it's their careers riding on it. There's a lot more genuine, I think, stress in regards to like, this is your career, where an amateur is just much more, I think, just perceived, I'm a failure type thing, which is unfortunate. But
yeah, well, I think you're right. AJ Tye, who I've become very close with AJ. He's a fabulous man and really enjoyed working with him. But he was a tough sell. Like he had an idea in mind of what he wanted to achieve and what he needed, but how he had to do it was scary. In a nutshell, he was struggling to maintain his ball speed. His ball speed was dropping away. His so-called best skill of his variations in white ball cricket were becoming less effective because, in particular, his slower ball, the difference in speed between his pace off ball and his pace on ball was coming closer together, and he felt that he lost the ability to bowl his bouncer and keep people honest. But I could see pretty clearly from watching him where he was robbing himself of a potential yard of pace. And it took me, I remember the first time I suggested to him, look, there's something I've got for you if you want it. And he straight away said, I don't want it, and I was like, no, that's no problem. I don't have a problem with that because I don't want someone to dip a toe into anything unless they're willing to commit. And I got the impression that he wasn't ready. And that might have been because his relationship and mine had not yet got strong enough. It could have been what you're talking about. Why would I change now? I'm 30 years old and you're telling me I need to change. That can be quite scary for more senior successful bowlers. But I think it's important not to give up as a coach. If I really believed, as I said to you, that I could add performance, then I almost felt it was my duty to do so. I just had to get my messaging across to him. And I just kept drip feeding him. Every day I'd walk past him and say, mate, it's here if you want it. And he'd sort of smirk at me and walk past me. And I must have done that. I did that for weeks. I said, AJ, I'm here if you need me. I've got it if you want it.
That's amazing.
And
that's brilliant.
I think I eventually wore him down as if to think, well, what is this bloody thing he's got? I need to find out what this is.
Is this a best drill?
Just a really small little technique. Yeah. And it was a really small technical change that he just had to be prepared to give it a go. But the mindset thing you talk about, until his mindset was open enough to give it a try, and I'd sort of said to him, because I'm with you, mindset's so important. I said to him, this is what you've got to expect, though. You've got to expect that you're going to do something here, and it's going to feel pretty awful to start with, and you're going to want to give it up. You're going to want to say this is too difficult, and it's probably not something for me. And I said, you've got to try and frame different as and awful as positive, because it means you're changing. And that's exactly what I'm asking you to do, is to change.
Yeah.
And all I ask for you then is, I will hopefully be able to provide you with some evidence that this is going to, in fact, increase your ball speed. And then we went down this process of actually doing it, and we got the speed gun out. We were able to put numbers to it and actually provide him the evidence that it was okay. And then it was really then that he went, oh, maybe this guy isn't a lunatic and he actually knows what he's talking about. So I'll give it a crack. And away we went, and we did some sessions, and he started to get feedback from his players and guys coming out the net saying, mate, you're hitting the bat hard, and and they would come out to me and say, AJ's really coming through today. This is awesome. I said, well, can you give him that feedback? Because it's better off coming from you than it is from me. And he started to puff his chest out and really believe. And then his first BBL game of BBL 10 down in Hobart, he smashed 140 odd K an hour in his first game, which he hadn't been at for nearly 2 years. And then he was away. After that, he was absolutely flying and had all the evidence that he needed. But it took a long time, and I think that's what coaches need to realise is there's no quick fix or no quick wins. There has to be a real commitment from both parties, coach and player, that we're going to do this together and we're going to ride the highs and we're going to feel the lows, but we're in it together. And whatever happens, sort of, I'm there to support him as his coach. And I think once we had that established, away we went. And now it's just a matter of now managing it, just checking in with him, making sure he's still doing his drills because they don't stop. But mindset was important because at first it wasn't the right mindset, but by the end of it, it was, and it just took time to get there.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Like, I love how you've kind of talked so much about the coach to athlete relationship, and I went through and mapped out my, you might say, coaching philosophy and sort of put things in there because I just enjoy frameworks. And below the if I build ground up, you've got the, I'd say, mind, body, and soul individual. You want to get to know someone, but you've got the coach to athlete relationship. Like, you could have the best whiz-bang, best drills in the world, but like, if you don't have a supportive coach to athlete relationship and you can't communicate, or you can't find a way to get through, it doesn't matter jack shit how good your coaching methods might be. You can't actually get through to them. I think it's so interesting, like how you've gone. Like, what I've probably taken away most is how you've really communicated in this. Like, you've developed these, you might say, coaching questions where they're quite introspective. You're inviting the player to, with their own answer, essentially, enter into what we're looking to do. And look, if they don't make that first answer, it's like, no worries. Like, I'll put another door in front of you to see if you want to come and walk through it. I just think that's quite brilliant. Like, and obviously, I think people, when they do eventually listen to this, like, at the top level, like, you're going to meet resistance, obviously. And I think it's so wonderful that how you guys have managed that. It's ended up in this position in the future where, like, one, he's gotten great improvements. Two, you've got a great coach-athlete relationship. Like, this in and of itself, I wonder how many coaches, one, have the patience, two, might not handle those encounters as productively, or then three, it might end up being something like, well, don't you want to get better, etc., which is just obviously a completely wrong sort of question to kind of put back at someone, but I just think that's brilliant. And then the other thing, coaching based on how does it feel, because I recently have been doing a lot of, like, I want a bowler to define what it feels when it's your best, what it feels when it's your worst, because I need you to start to think of some terms to describe these things. Because in my mind, like, my best approach is going to be, if you can feel it and you can really well define it, then that's what you're chasing every single ball. So when it's not there, what's missing? And that's what you bring back in. As opposed to what some people do, which is the most ineffective strategy I've found. When things aren't working, they go and investigate it, and they might pick out something very internal about one body part at a certain point in time, and then they'll have another one, and they start building these checklists of things. And I like to think about it like, your front arm's wrong. Okay, so you focus on the front arm, so you knock over that domino stack, and you're trying to pick them back up, but then their bowling arm goes wrong. So, oh, fuck, I better change that. So go over there. Then the front leg doesn't feel right. And next thing you know, you're completely lost. Whereas I love how it's like, if you can feel it, when you're at the top of your mark, you can kind of hold on to it. But I know that there's some coaches around the world that, might coach based on what they think is theoretically better. It feels unnatural for the bowler. And when they're at the top of their mark and they have to execute this checklist of things for it to go right, they can't do it. Their bowling collapses. I just think that's just so. I just love how it's define your bowlings, that you can put into your own words really, really clearly, so that you can find it, as often as you can. And I mean, if I keep ranting, like, I remember NASA said something that really stuck with me. It was on a Sky Sports thing, but he said, like, I'll try to use my best English accent, like, if you want to play for England, you've got to have your best day every day. And I just thought, that's wonderful. Like, it doesn't mean that you've got to go up there and take 10 for a 5 for every game. But, like, I know Felt's mentioned, like, you communicated that every ball is an event. It's like, well, all right, based on that, you got to bring your A game this ball. If you try to bowl a great length ball and take top of off and it's too full and you get hit over your head for 6, well, it was too full. That's pretty straightforward to, learn from and then bring back into your coaching. Away we go. That to me was like, how can you bring your best game? And, you can start to see like the kinds of conversations or I guess the approaches that you've cultivated, that's a better word, into these fast bowlers. And yeah, it's just fascinating to hear. And also it's nice to think that I'm somewhat along a similar path. So I feel like I'm on somewhat of a right track, which is wonderful too. That's my little plug for myself. I'm good at that.
Oh, yeah. No, 100% you are, mate. I follow your Instagram account and have done for some time, and I've seen the stuff that you're trying to promote, and I love the holistic approach that you take, because it really is that. You can't just turn up to a training session and say to a young fast bowler, put your arm here and do this, and that's a coaching relationship. It's not that. It's so much deeper than that. I think my coaching philosophy was probably born out of the fact I didn't have a bowling coach, and I had very little support in my own professional career, because when I turned up here to Worcestershire back in 2001, there was a head coach and that was it. There was no bowling coach, so you had nowhere to go. If you wanted to get better, you had to try and figure it out yourself, which a lot of people say, oh, isn't that great learning? But we all need a little bit of help, especially when we have bad days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I reckon you have more bad days than good days, 100% in cricket. It's just the way it works out, because it's tough in professional sport. But to not have that support, that person who's invested in you and everything that you do is difficult. So I think that's driven my coaching philosophy, is always, how can I help? It's got to be, how can I help? And it's far more than just standing at the back of a net. It's understanding how are they, first of all, when they turn up to a training session, whether they're 25, 30 years old or 12. How was your day today? Yeah. Because if they've not had a good day, then you're not going to have a good session. Or your session might be the best part of their day. So how can we make this really good fun today, so that when he comes back tomorrow, or she comes back tomorrow, they're in better spirits? It's a real all-encompassing way of looking at it. And I think it's like, I'm a parent. I've got 2 children. I've got a 15-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son who have both started new schools just today. They've come all the way back from Australia. Right. And they're going into their new schools.
About the first day.
Stressful for them. And I think if I coach like I parent, then I know that the guys I coach, the girls I coach, are going to get nothing but care. But they're also going to get a little bit of correction when they need it, but not in a way that's, telling them or standing over them. It's basically asking them a question of, could we have done this another way? Or could you have reacted differently? Or what if you looked at the problem this way? Almost like you said, keep inviting them to be the ones that find the answers. Keep inviting them to be the ones that drive their own development. And you talk there about my philosophy around each ball is an event. Well, each ball is an opportunity for success. So, like you said, you bowl one poor ball, doesn't mean the next ball won't be an absolute snorter. You know what I mean? You can't let one poor ball affect your day or the next 5 minutes of your life. So it's sort of, again, a bit like you, just trying to stay really sort of philosophical about it and enjoy what you're doing, and understand that you're just moments away from having either the best day or the best moment, or or it's AJ Tye suddenly hitting the speed gun at 145. I mean, he was euphoric when he saw that speed gun at 145. It's all he talked about for 3 weeks. We couldn't shut him up.
That's so good.
And it's those things that are so important. And I think when we're coaching our young fast bowlers in particular, and they're getting ferried around between different schools, different coaches, different people's opinions. Everybody wants a slice of the pie. Just put yourself in that young person's shoes and imagine being spoken to by 10 sets of parents, if you like. It would just be mind-blowingly difficult. So, I'm always very mindful of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of really filtered nicely into one of the other kind of conversation topics I thought would be interesting around, coaching philosophy across the journey, and it kind of sounds very similar to how I kind of built up what I was doing. Like, definitely wasn't as talented a cricketer. I was much more broken. I think I stopped bowling at 19, and then batted for 3 years. Came back to bowling, got broken again, then came back to bowling after a bowler got injured in the warm up in a second grade match, grade cricket, and thought, well, look, I'll do it, and then got the kind of passion back and finally found Simon. But I remember, like, I was really keen. I wanted to know, like, I wanted to figure out what is it that just is making me do this. Not just injured, but like, where could I get better? And there's nowhere to go. Like, back in that day, the first people I found was, cricket strength, so Steph and Juicy. And then I found Simon, who was on Bowl Strong. And I'd drive down to Geelong, which was an hour and 20 minutes away, go down there, train for an hour. He was wonderful because, like, we would just talk for hours after. It was out of that I thought, as a coach, like, and I probably built my services around that. I am here if you have questions, because I know what it's like when you've got something that isn't answerable. And if it's not answerable, then you'll create maybe assumptions, which could then potentially filter into an ineffective training approach. So if I know that, like, trial and error is great, but if you don't know, like, where you're digging, like, how are you supposed to end up finding where you're supposed to be? But if you can get someone that can kind of guide you along the way, or when you have a question, you've got someone to go to, like, how wonderful is that? Or someone that, like, knows your mindset, so knows when you're going the wrong way and can invite you into understanding why you're going the wrong way, open up those perspectives, and it's great. And, like, but it's interesting. Like, I still don't think there's as much technical support, you might say, or 4 pillars, if I use that term, to sort of guide bowlers. And I don't know, I really dislike the word doubt. I have a doubt. It's like, it's just such a, I hate that word. It's a real negative connotation. It's like, I have a query about something. It's like, I love to coach based on what's working, let's build on it. Not what's working, let's explore it. So I just think that's great. And I think that showing someone that you care and helping them through that journey, like, I've also managed to build a service out of it. So, they kind of pay me weekly and they get their coaching, they get their physical programs if that's what they want to tear up to, but they can ask me all the questions they want. I mean, we've chatted for a bit and I'm hard to shut up. Sometimes I have to tell myself, like, Stubbzy, you can stop talking now.
Well, mate, I'm the same. I love a chat. And but, it's no different. You're saying that you're providing a service and you're getting paid for that. I'm doing the same. I get paid to do this job. But there's no doubt, though, that that's great, but I don't think about that because, like I said to you, this huge duty of care and responsibility that you feel, it still hurts me when I turn up to watch junior cricket or, male or female junior games or whatever, and I see some of the bowling actions and some of the stuff that's going wrong that's not being sort of monitored or fixed, or you get the young kids that come in and they're throwing it and the coach is just hoping they get through the air without getting called so the next coach can try and deal with it. This sort of stuff and I think that's unfortunate because that's unfortunate. That's where you and I end up getting quite busy because we get these 16 and 15 and 17-year-olds that are coming to us broken or coming to us, 3 yards slower than they potentially might be because their technique's all wrong and they haven't had any coaching. Or the saddest thing of all is when you hear of a young 14 or 15-year-old guy or girl that's given cricket up because they've had 2 stress fractures and he can't play and they fall out of love with it and think, I'll do something that doesn't hurt. Yeah. And it's all because, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to just attack what goes on at lower age groups because there's a lot of volunteers that work in that level. There's a lot of parents doing their best with limited knowledge and stuff like that, and they are trying. But until we're able to get, interventions and get a message down through the levels, some really simple things that people actually buy into and actually do, then we're always going to have this problem of young bowlers getting hurt. And you think how many years conversations have been going about fast bowling, and the injury rates haven't really dropped. You know, they're still getting stress fractures. They're still happening, but I do believe a lot of them are unavoidable. And I still think technique is one of those things that it's not coached either, not enough anyway, to keep them safe. It's like people are still scared of it, and actually it's not that scary.
No, not at all. And, you know, I've really enjoyed trying to, like, just refine the communication down to, like, just a couple of words that just takes care of everything. But, you know, I love banging on about relaxation and running mechanics, you know, mainly because relaxation, I mean, most, like I said, I almost feel as a coach like I'm removing the limitations that you've already placed on yourself, whether it's poor running mechanics or, you know, you're opening up too early because maybe you're tensed. So the muscles first have to relax before they can contract again. You know, if every kid learned how to run, I'd probably hazard a guess that you'd probably see much better techniques and probably fewer bowling actions. Sorry, not fewer bowling, that makes sense. Fewer injuries from poor bowling actions. But you did give me kind of a good idea there to say, you know, I always thought about opening up a membership thing where it's chuck a bunch of information up there, but there's probably scope to say, put a bit of a fundamentals thing together for parents to come through and go, all right, you know, I've had a few people come to me and say, oh, do you coach 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds? I sort of sit back and think, and sometimes these people are overseas, like someone from the US reached out. I'm like, I could, don't really know what I do, you know, if it's online and he's over there, like maybe we could have a chat and I could kind of say, well, why don't we set up this and let him have some fun trying to execute this challenge, so to speak. It's that's a good little insight. I might have to put some work on that and see if I can put a parents course together, because, you know, the good thing is too, they've got the money to pay, and then that just goes into building the next thing that could sort of come up.
Oh, mate, anything that helps get the message out there, because absolutely. I think the other thing that frustrates me a lot about youngsters is everyone's very quick. Oh, he's just not strong enough. They're not strong enough to cope. It doesn't matter what sport you play at what age, you can be balanced. It's not that they're not strong enough, it's just that they're not balanced enough, because what they're doing is creating imbalance. It's not to do with strength necessarily. It's to do with the fact they're running a million miles an hour, because I think that's what they have to do to bowl fast. They jump 6 feet because I think that's what they should do, because they've seen someone else do it. And they just can't control their bodies at that speed. So it's just putting them into some nice running patterns and some nice movement patterns that maintain balance and allow them to deliver a skill potentially not at the speed that they want, but in a safe way, and knowing that this is just the start of things. And it's not strength or any of those things. So anyone can coach a young athlete to be balanced. We can all use interventions that put young people into good positions and make it fun. And often I hear, oh, but there's so many, I've got 20 kids here. Well, you know what? It's about 50 quid or 35 quid to get a bag of those poles. Invest in your club, invest in your child, go and buy some, create a playground for them to explore, but stay in good positions. It can be done. We get too many excuses, sadly, at that lower level.
Yeah, and I just started doing some weekend coaching I called it a masterclass because it fit well with what I was doing on YouTube. But I thought I've coached enough guys one-on-one, and like private coaching usually does come at a premium, but you don't usually get people coming in weekly to get the, you might say, required coaching to get to where they potentially could be. So I thought, well, I coached enough sessions to be able to probably run a bunch of guys through their own individual technical work and then have some rest going. So I did something over the weekend where I had like 5 bowls on Saturday, 4 on Sunday. I had 3 lanes going, and they all kind of went through and did their own thing. And I remember kind of thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if at every single local club, like fast bowlers had a lane where, you know, that's where they did their warm-up, whether it was, you know, you might just roll through 2 overs of alignment with a string line or some poles or some currents, like anything that just gets you going in straight lines. and then you move into your fast bowling more nets. Like, it seems really simple to me. Obviously, I've thought this through and thought it through for a while, but wouldn't that be a wonderful thing that you could possibly add into your own local club? And it wouldn't cost that much either. Like you said, like, the poles aren't super expensive. The cones are even cheaper, Plus, you'd then give fast bowlers an actual warm-up, because that's another thing. Like, there is no fast bowler who does a proper fast bowling warm-up when they warm up at local training, because not one fast bowler I know, when they go into the nets, is ready to say, bowl their first ball. So, and then you get another issue out of that, where you get a mismatch between where do you start competitively bowling versus where are you warming up. So you get the jitters when they go into games, because they've never really trained to like go, all right, first ball we're on. And who knows, it might take them a few more than it probably should. I did think that was kind of interesting. And the other thing I was going to sort of bring up was, I remember sort of saying to people like, Glenn McGrath's ruined more fast bowlers than he's helped, which is, a very playful way of saying, because you like to move into the crease, bowl stump to stump and come through, you see some bowlers that go, I'm just bowling stump to stump. But like, the way that you're going in is your energy is still going that way, and you're falling away this way. And if you do watch Glenn, he's not steaming in, and he does straighten himself up as best he possibly can. So I just always thought that was such an interesting thing where we watch our idols on TV, and we might not take the best learning out of it.
I think there's no doubt we still have to embrace everybody's uniqueness, and there will always be those that do things a little bit differently. But again, it still comes down to those two things. It's okay to be unique. It's okay to be very different. But if you think there's an opportunity to improve performance or keep them safe, then it's definitely worth the question. But only if they're, like I said, the first question you can ask is, if you could bowl faster with less effort, or I could improve your performance with less effort, would you be interested? Most are. Some won't be. That's okay. It's okay to say no. Because if they really have some time to think about it, and they're curious enough, they'll come knocking on your door and say, you know what, coach, maybe I will give that a go.
And you got to find, like, I reckon most people, when you drop that little thought into their head, based on how they go in their next couple of games, because it's there, they might be kind of evaluating themselves, going, am I bowling fast enough? Are my skills kind of good enough? And I think that's where the real value of a good question is. We shouldn't share all the, the psychological secrets us coaches have, but I do think that that's just a wonderful way to kind of get people thinking about what you want them to think about. And that's when you talked about caring and like having a mentor or a guide, like, that's probably the best part. You can tune people into what they should be thinking about, and not getting caught up in the things that, are only going to end up going around the spiral. Yeah, but look, I think what I wanted to kind of continue with was, you've sort of talked through early sort of stages, but now I'm kind of curious to hear how your coaching fast bowling philosophy has evolved, like, across your, now kind of coaching career. But look, that depends on how much time you've got, because to be honest, I could probably find questions or like things to just rant about for a couple of hours.
I'll tell you what, I've got to be up in Birmingham in about 50 minutes, because Nathan McAndrew, our Aussie overseas, is here, so I've got to go and do a session with him. But I will finish with this question, because I think it's a good question that you just asked. But in terms of how it's developed, it's got a lot more simple, my coaching philosophy. Like, there are only I only have 3 non-negotiables, and we've touched on them already. One is that willingness and openness to know that you could be better than you are today. And then the second one is, when you decide that is the case and you dip a toe, then I want a full commitment, because I'm giving you my full commitment. So that means we don't just try it for a session, we bin it, and we don't just try it for a week. We're going to start a process that we both agree is going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to, like I said, be a bit of fun and some tough stuff, some good stuff. But we're in it together because we've committed to this goal, and away we go. And then the third one is just feedback. It has to be 2 ways. It can't just be coach to player. It's got to be player to coach, and it's got to be honest and open And, it can be anything from the player saying, I don't understand. It can be anything from, coach, will you just shut up for 5 minutes and let me bowl the ball? It could be absolutely anything. And likewise,
you get that?
I need to be able to feedback. You're not giving me your best effort today. Why is that? Is everything okay? All these sorts of things, but it has to be constant communication during session, post session, in between session, because, like I said, it's a full commitment from us both, and it doesn't really go much further than that. My philosophy, because that for me is where I develop players. There's obviously another parts of my role in my job where I have to support them tactically and emotionally and all that sort of stuff, which that's just another part of the job. But none of them can do all those things we're talking about unless they play games of cricket, and the only way they can do that is to keep staying fit and healthy. So it still drives me to make sure, like I said to you, I have a huge duty of care and a huge responsibility. These young players want to fulfill all their dreams and all their goals. It's a massive responsibility as a coach to make sure that they have all the tools that they need to do that. And even if they don't, I'd love to have a conversation where they come up to you and say, you know what, coach, I never quite got there, but I know we did everything we could to give me the best shot.
Right. And
then I know that I've done everything as a coach that gave them the best shot. And then we can all sleep well at night.
You know what? I think that's just a wonderful line to finish on.
No worries.
Well, look, mate, I appreciate you